So good. Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to see all you here. My name is Riina Salmivalli, and I work here at CSC as a senior specialist. I'm also the coordinator of our national node here in Finland. We have today an interesting program within our event. We will start with the first part, more of an introduction to RDA. What is RDA about, and how can one participate to RDA activities? Then we have two Finns. We have Ari and Heidi here, who will tell about their experiences from their participation to different RDA activities during the years. Then the thing that everybody was looking for already in the outside this hall. So we will have coffee a bit later. So starting at 9:50. Please be patient until that. And after that, we will look deeper into what is a national node activity and what do we do here. Then we have some more guest speakers after the coffee break. So we have Sarah Jones from DCC UK, who presents us the work of FAIR Data Expert Group. We will have a short commentary from Leif Laaksonen as well. And after that, we will have a view on the National Open Science and Research Initiative, what will happen after ATT. And actually, it's not on the program here, but Heidi Leine will also give a short commentary on that presentation. Some practicalities. We have Wi-Fi code on the table there. So if you need one, just please help yourself. Another thing is that we have in this room something like 30 people, but we have also remote participants. And therefore, please, if you have comments or questions, use the microphone so that it is for the remote participants easier to follow the discussions. I guess we are ready to start. So what is RDA really about? A Research Data Alliance was established 2013. It is a community-driven initiative established by the European Commission, the National Science Foundation of the United States, and the Department of Innovation of Australian government. The vision is that researchers and innovators could openly share their research data across technologies, disciplines, and countries, and to build the social and technical bridges for enabling open sharing of data. By all this, we of course are looking forward new scientific discoveries and better research opportunities. As we all know, the current landscape of data, research data, is highly fragmented, but in RDA we believe that we can tackle these problems together by creating common solutions. So what is RDA really about? What happens in RDA? RDA is a neutral space for research data practitioners and researchers to come together to design and implement new tools and solutions to enable sharing research data. Any individual or organization can join, but today we are focusing more on the individual participation possibilities. So what one can do to join RDA? I guess most of the people in this room have been in touch with RDA before, but just to recap a little, being an individual member of RDA basically means that you comply with this guiding principle of RDA. They are listed here: openness, consensus, balance, harmonization, community-driven, and non-profit attitude. You can, of course, agree to these principles, but really to be part of the community, you would, in practice, need to sign up to RDA website. It is free of charge, and that gives you opportunities to join different working and expert groups. So as an individual member, why to join RDA? Here are some of the benefits that one can get for participating. It is about contributing to data infrastructure development, working and sharing your own expertise and experiences. You get access to networks of colleagues globally. And you, of course, you will also gain professional development or tools for your own professional development at the same time. One of the important aspects is that the importance of sharing data practices within or across different disciplines, technologies, and countries. It is acknowledged all over the globe. But what are the solutions and how these can be tackled? That is another question, of course. Also, there is more and more understanding that data practices should be part of basic university curriculum as well. So who is RDA? RDA is about its members. There are at the moment almost 7,000 people across the globe who have signed up to be an individual member of RDA. Here you can see a graph if you are interested about what kind of people there are. There's no restrictions of who can join by profession, so anyone basically can. Here we see that at the moment the academia and research is the biggest share of the individual members, and I think that is very easily to understand when talking about Research Data Alliance. Another big chunk is government and public services, but we also see IT developers, enterprises of different sizes, and policy and funding agencies. As I said earlier, RDA originally was an initiative that was established by US, Europe, and Australia. But in fact, during the somewhat years, RDA has grown to be truly a global initiative, and at the moment there are representatives and members from all different continents. As you see, Europe is still going strong. About half of the individual members come from Europe. So, how is the work done? How can one contribute? The interest and working groups of RDA are the place where people come together to work on topics of their interest. It is a place to develop and also implement data infrastructure solutions. And there are many kind of different groups. At the moment there exist 91 groups, which are divided into working groups and interest groups. There's a slight difference between interest and working groups. To start with the interest groups, these are open-ended. They are basically people coming together to work on a specific challenge of research data problem that can be addressed with infrastructure solutions. Then there are the working groups that are meant to develop and implement tools, policies, or practices to enable sharing research data. There will be now, to warn you a little, 4 slides about the different groups. There are 91, and it is somewhat impossible at the given time to go through them all, but I will just give you the idea of what kind of group there exists. So firstly, you can see the domain science focused groups. It includes both interest groups and working groups, all the way from biodiversity data integration to structural biology and weather and climate. Then there are the groups that relate to different kind of partnerships. So, for example, we can see the Elixir RDA World Data System Scholarly Link Exchange Working Group, just to mention one. Here we have the interest and working groups that are focused on reference and sharing. So we can see the data citation, for example, reproducibility interest groups, and the national data services interest group. Then there are the groups that are focused on community needs, so building on some identified needs already from certain communities. We see there, for example, co-data, early career and engagement, interest groups, and ethics and social aspects of data interest group. Still going on. Here we see list of the groups that focus on data stewardship and services, such as data rescue, preservation infrastructure interest groups, and just to mention one, repository platforms for research data. Also the base infrastructure groups that you can see at the bottom of the slide. So how to find your place? There are 91 groups. I think many of them are very interesting for many of us, but I would give one tip if you have opportunity either in an event like this to discuss with people what are the groups that they have found interesting, or if you have opportunity to join or participate RDA plenary, that is also an easy access to test if the content of the interest of a working group is suitable for you. About RDA recommendations and outputs, there's something concrete that comes really out of these working and interest groups, which is of course nice. We have classified the RDA recommendations and outputs on 3 different categories. The first is about the recommendations, and these are the official recommendations coming from RDA. They can be specification or standards, and some of them have even made it to be ICT technical specifications endorsed by European Commission. Then there are the supporting outputs. These can be, for example, guidelines or brochures, so they are not that easily adoptable by others, but still useful information produced in the groups. And then the other outputs that can be, for example, articles or surveys. And all these go through certain kind of evaluation of RDA, the recommendations being the most formal ones, and they have really gone through a formal process of evaluation and discussion by the communities. Here are just some of the recommendations and outputs. I will not go through these in detail because this is something that we will get back to later on today. But there are actually, if you saw outside this room, a nice deck of cards that includes all the recommendations and outputs that were published until last year. So please have a look. I think I will skip some of these slides. They are all on RDA website, so you won't miss anything even though I'm skipping these slides. Adoption and implementation. These outputs and recommendations, they are not done just for fun. So these are really used and they are wished to be used. One of RDA's goal is to promote the awareness of these outputs and give different scientific communities opportunities to adopt these recommendations and other outputs. This is even supported by RDA, so there is available financial support for adoption of these outputs and these fundings available, they are announced, I think, 2 times a year or similar within RDA adoption calls. And of course, here at CSC, we are happy to help if you are interested in adopting one of these cases, how we can support you. Another up I can actually show here. Just all these adoption cases are online. There are quite many of them already, so if you are interested in any specific output or how to adopt it, you can find already quite a lot of information online. So what are these plenaries? These are the place where RDA people at least hope to gather twice a year. Of course, due to travel funds, that is not, of course, able for everybody every year, but it is an interesting event indeed. The latest plenary was organized in Berlin in March, and there was more than 600 participants in this conference. It is actually a working conference, so to say, so they are running parallel sessions of these interest and working groups where everybody is able to join. At least the plenary in Berlin this March was, or there was streaming from quite many of these meetings. So if you are not able to travel to Botswana in November, I think that's quite understandable, but you can still join or have a look at the meetings online. Plenary meetings, of course, it is about exchanging knowledge, but also about learning the new trends, strategies, and of course to meet the people. Quite a lot of the work that is done in interest and working groups happens remotely, and the plenaries are the place where you can really meet these people. Just to give you a view of what happens in a plenary typically. So they are, of course, the common introductions of the conference, but also the plenaries that the sessions that run in parallel. Here you can see that there are several different groups, working groups and interest groups gathering up to work on a specific topic. The plenaries, they are normally, or I think they have been 3 to 4 days, something like that. So it means quite a big number of meetings. How to get to Botswana? That's a good question. RDA supports especially the early career researchers and experts by travel grants. And this program has existed since 2014. We have not been that bad in these calls in Finland. So far we've had 12 grants to Finland supporting the participation, and this money can be used for travels, accommodation, and registration. This is one of the things, the calls to plenary support and also to adoption cases are something that we would here at the Finnish National Node keep you up to date. Yes, just a graph to show about the Berlin plenary. Altogether, 661 participants from 41 countries, and there were 13 participants coming from Finland. The next plenary is indeed in Botswana. It is in late October this year. And the one that will be organized next spring will be in Philadelphia. But I think that is about the general introduction to RDA. Is there any questions or comment at this point? Yeah.
As a person who knows nothing about this, how is this financed?
RDA. Most of the experts who work in the expert or interest group, they are voluntarily based. So I think most of the Finns that have participated are working for other projects, or they have other sources of funding where they can how they can contribute to this work. Any other questions? Heidi, please.
Also thrown. About the Botswana dates, it was in November, wasn't it? Yeah, not October, just to correct you.
Kenny?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm giving you false information, so what can I say? Thank you, Heidi. I guess if that is all for now, we are ready to continue to the second part of this morning. So Heidi and Ari, please join us to tell about your RDA journey. Okay. Firstly, thank you for coming here this morning. It was relatively early morning still. Thank you for sending the short bios and your pictures as well. But I think this is nice at the backside, but please, Heidi, present yourself.
So, hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Heidi Laine, and I'm here to tell you about my RDA journey. For starters, I'm currently a doctoral student at the University of Helsinki, working on a PhD project on research integrity and open science. But I'm also the secretary of the Finnish Committee for Research Data, which is the national committee for CODATA. CODATA is the data committee of International Council for Science, and then I guess I could call myself an open science activist to a degree. I've been involved with the Open Knowledge Finland Open Science Working Group for some 3 years now. Organized campaigns related to open science and worked on several projects that relate to open science and especially data issues from a point of view or other citizen science, data citation, and lastly about how to coordinate open science and data on a national level. So that's my hat pretty much.
Okay.
Yes, I'm Ari Asmi. I'm originally an atmospheric physicist. I did my PhD on, at that time we called it data analysis. Nowadays people would call it data science. It's a fancier term for the same thing. And there, what was really annoying there was trying to access the data and trying to negotiate with. I used measurement data from stations, and it was really pain to negotiate with each one of them separately on how could I use it and what are the terms, what kind of formats, and so on. So that was really frustrating. And then one day in the coffee room in Kumpula, I met Leif there in the front row, and he was saying that you want to go to RDA once, and I'd never heard about it. And that was the first meeting, but I will go there later on this one. So that was one part of the thing why I ended up in this open science point, was that I was really frustrated of actually as a researcher. But then somehow I moved away from actually doing science, and I started to work with research infrastructures, and these are big facilities for observations and so on in environmental field. And surprise, surprise, the same things came up, and it's exactly the same issues with the open data, but there from the perspective of data provider. And so it's all connected. And right now I've been working for a couple of months as I'm only part-time anymore in the university. I'm working in ICOS-ERIC, which is the International Carbon Observation Network, which has their headquarters in Helsinki. And there it's really working in one of these observation networks, trying to make it available to everybody. So those are my main hats. I also have lots of other kind of smaller things related to this, but maybe it comes up in the conversation.
You want to tell about your RDA hat, perhaps? A bit deeper
But I thought that would come later.
Oh, this is
my,
the
yeah, my RDA hat was, that first one was that I kind of accidentally ended up in a data citation working group, and we started to. Oh, it was at that time we just talked about it in Göteborg in the first meeting, and I told them what I would think, how it should work, and suddenly I ended up as a chairman of the working group, and then after that I try to count them. I don't know even how they all working groups, but I'm in a 4 chairman position in one of these working groups. It's usually shared, so it's not all my work, but still there is a lot of different kind of activities there. And then I've been, of course, in the Finnish level as well, and then on the Nordic level, and then also I was once invited into Potsdam for the German Open Science RDA meeting, which nobody told that the panel was in German. So that was a bit. They heard that I lived in Germany, but that was like 15 years ago. I don't talk that well, so it was kind of exciting.
Some nice experiences, obviously. Had you been involved both, or you have been active both on national, but also on the international level quite a lot? So how is your daily work with research data?
Well, I do research, so so I have my own data to manage. On a day-to-day level, well, it's hard to say. There really isn't like a typical day for me. I've been changing roles and projects faster than sucks lately. But yeah, maybe I could say a few words about that, how I've come to this RDA family in the first place, so that maybe gives you a better picture of why I'm here and where I'm coming from. So compared to Ari, I'm a newbie. I only attended the second plenary of RDA in Washington was it in 2013? Yeah, that's the year when RDA started. The reason was that the Göteborg plenary was sold out. So because I was at the time working at the Council of Finnish Academies, which is a joint body of the 4 Finnish learned societies, the science academies, and we heard about it. Was Jussi Nuortava from the National Archive who first alerted us at the council to this new kid in town, and we wanted to know what it was about. We were in the process of starting a national committee for co-data. Finland wasn't yet a member at the time, but we wanted to become one, and we were kind of scanning the landscape. And so I attended the Washington plenary. It was quite the experience. I had no really no prior knowledge of research data issues. My background is in social science history, and until then I didn't really know that historians have data. I wasn't familiar with the concept at all. So it was definitely a crash course, and I remember talking to Ari there, and I probably seemed very lost as I was. But then the next plenary that I attended, there was quite a big gap there, was the 7th in Tokyo, which I attended as an RDA Early Career Fellow. So you showed the number of Finnish people who have used these grants. There was 12, so I guess I count for 2 of the spots there, and the first time was in Tokyo when I applied for the Early Career Fellowship, and I got it, and I got to participate in the Tokyo and present a poster about my PhD work there. And then from that on, I've been attending the plenaries pretty steadily, but again from different points of view. So 8th plenary in Denver, that was the International Data Week for the first time. So there I presented a paper at the SciDataCon and got first initiated with the data citation discussion. The 9th plenary in Barcelona, I was already head deep in the data citation discussion, because we were starting to work on the data citation roadmap with the Finnish Committee for Research. Then I've written down all of these because it's kind of it's an evolution. So in Montreal, it was again data citation. That was my main interest there, and I presented a poster about the Finnish roadmap, and the 11th, the last plenary in Berlin, I again attended with the support of the RDA Europe, but as an expert this time. So I've kind of graduated a bit. So there was this scheme for expert travel support, which was it the first time?
Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
At Berlin plenary when this possibility was given. So I again applied and got it, and this time it was about the UNIFI Open Science and Data Action Plan, and then especially European Open Science Cloud. That was my main interest. So there's been a lot. So I haven't been like Ari, you have been involved with the data citation working group from the early days. I've been kind of bouncing all over the place.
How do you find the work in the working groups and the interest groups?
I'm a bit of an outsider, I have to admit. So it's interesting. I sometimes feel like I have this ethnographer's view. I'm kind of observing these aliens in their natural habitat. So I've become a lot more acquainted with the language and the issues, and I can contribute more nowadays. But still I like to stick maybe a little bit to this outsider point of view, because I find that that's kind of my superpower. That what I bring to the table is this point of view and trying to look at the big picture. So sometimes I don't get it. I don't know what these people are talking about, but more and more I'm able to follow and even participate in the discussions. But it's definitely been a steep learning curve.
So in this working group you are involved in, how do you work in practice?
Well, I haven't been so much involved in in the actual work of actually any working group. I've more like followed their work most closely. Perhaps the data citation working group that Ari is co-chairing, and I've been more like at the national end of the work, trying to think how this fits with the national level and the national picture, and we did in the Finnish data citation roadmap, we refer to the output of the data citation working group. So I haven't worked on the output, but I have tried to enhance its national level usage. So that's kind of been my role, and that's probably the working group that I have the kind of the steadiest relationship with. And then there are certain interest groups that I've been following, but interest groups have a little bit different role than the working groups. They are more like these discussion forums.
So perhaps to Ari, the next one. How do you find the work within the groups in practice?
In practice, there are several aspects of it. I think one thing which I always found very cool about RDA is that you have so different people there. You have people who are coming really, even though you showed the pie chart and it looked like it's mostly researchers, but there's lots of different kind of researchers. And also, I mean, at least in the working group in data citation, it was interesting to work because all the other chairs were from IT, and they were looking at this data citation purely as an IT exercise, a technical problem which can be solved. And I think that I instead thought that the technical problem was trivial and the real problem was policy. And they thought exactly the opposite. And that's the thing where you get all these same people working on the same problem and trying to find out what is actually workable thing. And in working group, especially when you are there, the aim is that you have to be done in 18 months. So you have to have somebody who is actually doing something outside of the plenaries as well, and that makes it much more dynamic. And then it also makes the thing interesting. When you come to the plenary, you have these people who have been working with some other funding, usually, on this issue. And then you have this perfect solution, which you think is great. You come to the room in, I don't know, Denver somewhere, and then suddenly somebody says, by the way, this doesn't work with us. There's definitely something which is completely wrong. But that's really the most valuable input what you can get, and that's something which I always found that really useful is the diversity of people and the diversity of skills. What you end up with this kind of thing. The problematic part is to get people to do something outside of the working groups because nobody's being paid for it, so they have to have some other reason to really do this.
Yeah, actually linking back to Lea's question, how have you financed your participation?
Well, I've been in a lucky situation because, as I told, I work with the research infrastructures, and we get a lot of this kind of development projects from Commission. And at least in the very beginning, when the RDA was new, even then, suddenly the Commission, and Commission was a big funder of RDA, and they suddenly decided that this kind of RDA meetings are a really good idea, and you should really write it in your proposal that you want to go to the RDA meeting. And then I wrote every proposal which I've been that I might want to go to the RDA meetings, and then that's where I got my travel money for. So, and Commission seems happy, so that's good.
Yeah, so quite nicely embedded into your other activities.
Yeah.
Heidi, how about you? Have you found it easy or difficult to find a place and time for contributing to this work?
Well, in terms of the plenaries, it's always at the end of one plenary, it's a mystery to me whether I'll be able to attend the next one, and I tend to think that no way. I've used all the possible venues for travel support, but then something has so far always come up. Well, the first time I was there in my role of the science secretary of the Council of Finnish Academies. So of course I got the travel funding through there for the Tokyo plenary. I used the early career fellowship funding, and then again in Berlin, like I mentioned, I got support from the expert travel fund. And then the other times I've been there in my role of the Finnish Committee for Research Data secretary. So the committee gets funding from the Council of Finnish Academies, our kind of mothership. It's a few thousands of euros per year, but it's specifically for travel. So I've been able to take advantage of that. And about Botswana, it looks like I'll be able to attend that plenary as well, with the Finnish Committee for Research Data funding. So courtesy of the Academies of Science and of course the Ministry of Education and Culture behind everything. So it funds this network of national committees that the Finnish Committee for Research Data is a part of.
Let's hope it will be organized so that you would be able to attend. What about the work around the recommendations and outputs? Have you been involved in the process?
I can only speak for the data citation part. For the recommendations, we did draft this one quite relatively early on, and then we finalized and retuned them with the requirements when somebody came and said that okay, this doesn't work and so on. And then it was written into a paper. And after that, all this standardization work, I have read the emails, but I haven't done anything more to that. I think that's something what the especially these kind of more technically oriented people were much more interested in than I was.
What about you?
Well, unfortunately, I can't bring any diversity to the discussion because the data citation output is also the one that I'm most familiar with and have worked with on a national level trying to advance its implementation. We brought it into the data citation roadmap, which you can find at the website of Finnish Committee for Research Data, fcrd.fi. One of the recommendations that is made in the roadmap is that the data citation working groups output would be piloted in Finland as well. So far I don't know, I have no knowledge of anyone grasping that opportunity, but now that the data citation roadmap is also mentioned in the UNIFI Open Science and Data Action Plan, I'm optimistic that this will happen.
Okay, so as we heard, you've both been very active in various ways in RDA. What do you think, if you would need to name one thing that has been the most beneficial for you, thanks to your participation to RDA, well, what would it be?
It's hard to name just one thing. So
it can be a big one.
Yeah. Well, for me, RDA has been an extremely valuable learning experience. It has been this gateway to this whole research data discussion, and I've learned. I found a new world basically there, and learned a new language almost, and kind of also found my place in a way in the world. That sounds very grand, but yeah, kind of my professional calling almost, and it's a great place for networking also. So I've made some very well, I was about to say useful contacts, yeah, but of course meeting people and making friends it's not that utility side of only. It's been a pleasure to meet people from all over the world and to learn from them. So it's also great fun, the plenaries. They're really fun events, and the atmosphere is quite unlike anything I've experienced in other similar international gatherings. So it's very kind of warm and not a strict hierarchy or anything. You can talk to people on the kind of meet them eye to eye, not depending on your degrees or whatever, because the academia, it can be very meritocratic at times. So it's yeah.
That was very nicely formulated. I would say I guess you agree with Heidi here.
Yes, absolutely. I think that the networking part is very important. What I also I think is for me was really important, at least in the beginning, is that I'm not alone with my problems. They're exactly the same problems that everybody has, and also that it was also good to see that I'm not so smart as I thought, because I had all kind of great solutions, but then people told that no, we tried it already, it doesn't work. So these kind of experiences, I think they were one of the most valuable ones. But really, the networking and meeting people, I completely agree. This has been also professionally and personally a really excellent opportunity for me, and the openness of the people in that sense, that exactly what Heidi told about the lack of hierarchy. Because frankly, I don't know anybody. Maybe Leif knows something. How is there a hierarchy in RDA? I never. There must be some sort of, there's an organization behind it, but somehow nobody seems to care. Well, maybe, sorry. Well, I'm sure some people do, but most don't.
Okay. Thank you both. Are there any questions for Heidi and Ari? Yes, just a second.
You can.
If you throw it at me and not at me. Yes, sorry. I'm Leif Laakson, and there is a question which I have, which comes closely to what you were summing up with in a way already. And could you reflect a bit on how you see the being active nationally and being active on a global level, and how RDA in a way has been able to extend your. I mean, Ari was into it already, but I would, if you could, because I think there is the discussion always forever national versus the global, and how you see RDA and the rest of the field in a way. I throw this back. Oh, I see. There is another one. Okay.
Oh, still even closer. Okay. So the difference between the national and the RDA level, I think that they do feed to each other very well if they will to it. And I think that this is something what I sometimes, it's not a Finland issue. This is a global issue. Is that you usually have the problem of not invented here many times when people start to have these exactly like me. I have a great idea. I think I have the great solution for this, and then you have this international fora where then the people say that, well, frankly, that's not so great idea, or that we already have this one and we are doing this in every other country. And this connection between the national level can work really well, but what I've seen is also a bit of problem of getting these people who are really hands-on working, especially on the technical side, which could benefit really much of RDA, to actually even go to Berlin. That's not a long flight. I'm pretty sure I will not get these people to Botswana at all, but I mean, even to Berlin it was a challenge getting them. So there is definitely a barrier there, and there is a need of some sort of way of building these bridges also inside the national level.
you. Is this something that you would like to
comment this because I find the dichotomy national international level unuseful, even harmful, and I think I remember it was when Andrew Trillo, how do you pronounce his name, was visiting Finland not so long ago, when he told about the Australian way of taking advantage of RDA. That kind of really struck me how we in Finland could get a lot more value and use from RDAs. He said that they kind of take their issues and problems to RDA and work them there, and kind of take advantage of the bigger brain that is available when all of these great minds from all over the world meet, and so I think we definitely should do the same. There's no point in having first these issues solved on a national level and then taking them to the national level and kind of doing the work again. Even I think that's better than nothing, but still we should go to the platform of RDA with our national issues and work them there in the first place. And I know that the travel is of course a real thing, but in this digital era, I mean, there are so many ways to work together, even when we are not in the same room physically. So that's fine.
Thank you. So.
Okay, hi, good morning. I was wondering, when I looked at those participants of RDA, most of them are researchers. And when I'm looking at this room here, are there any researchers here? Like, okay, there's one, and yeah, and you as well. So, I'm just wondering, of course, service personnel, they have to do, they work and sort of provide services, but I think we do need researchers as well in order to know what kind of services they need. So what do you see, what would be the solution? How do we get more researchers? How do we activate them in taking part?
Well, I don't really have a clear solution for this one, because in the very first one in Göteborg meeting, I've told this to several people here in this room. I went to one of these working groups, not the data citation one, but for the other one, and everybody was exactly, this discussion was that where everybody was from. There was half of the room were IT specialists and half of the room were librarians. And I was the only researcher there. And then they started to ask me all kind of things about research, and I was like, I can't really answer all of this. And frankly, even though there is participants, the researchers there, I would say a lot of these researchers are either such we are working with data science or as a user, or then from the IT as an IT researcher or something like that. So really from the domains, sciences, I would say that the percentage is relatively small. And of course, getting the user interface there is very important. I think that this might, I'm not 100% sure that the plenaries are the right way to do it. Exactly because it's very hard to get the scientists to spend their time to go to talk about research data, because often it's kind of an additional product what they create or what they perhaps use. And that's why sometimes it's better to, what I call jalkauttaminen, to go straight to the places where the scientists are in their own conferences and try to go there. But that needs then somebody who actually kind of can act in the between. Of course, maybe it would be better to have a more direct connection, but how to create this, I have no idea.
Want to comment on this? Yeah, me neither. It's like I don't think that, like Ari said, the percentage of researchers is the correct picture, because I identify myself as a researcher, kind of, and but I've never been. Well, maybe when I was at the plenary through the early career fellowship, So these kind of instruments can bring researchers to the plenaries, but it's really not something that is worth their while, really. I think it comes down to what researchers are rewarded for doing, and this kind of stuff isn't there. So which comes back to the big questions of open science, how to incentivize other things than high impact factor journal articles.
It might be that I'm fishing after something here, but Ari, if this event would be organized at Viikki, would there be more researchers in this room?
This event, what we are having now, probably because they wouldn't need to pay for Seutulipu. So no, frankly, I would say it would come probably easier that way, or Kukkula. So you would probably get more, but I wouldn't say dramatically more, because again, even then we would really need to somehow pick them out of whatever places and say that okay, maybe you should come here, and then we have to have something concrete related to their own work that they need to come here. They think that somebody else takes care of the research program, and often that happens, but then we don't know what they actually would need and what would actually work. So it's a problematic issue.
So was that an indirect invitation to organize? Okay, thank you. That is what I was looking for. Any other comments or questions? I think we are very close to coffee time. Yes. So I think we are going to end this first part of the program. The coffee is outside. We can come back here at 10:15. So 15 minutes coffee break, and of course, please continue these discussions with Ari and Heidi.
So how did you end up here?
I am afraid that I am drifting away from science.
Okay.
So I still consider myself a scientist, but
Okay, all right.
there is a but.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, I think we are ready to continue. Everybody's nicely back in the auditorium. So, let's continue with the second part of our event. First, I will tell a bit more about the national nodes of RDA EU4 projects and what do we plan to do here in Finland. After that, we will have Sarah Jones telling about the FAIR Data Expert Group work with a twist of RDA in the presentation as well. After that, Leif will have a short commentary and then some national perspective to open science matters as well. Good. So, about the national nodes, I think quite many of you are familiar with the RDA Europe projects that have been running for quite many years already. The latest phase started as RDA EU4 project this March, and it is about building a network of national and regional nodes within Europe to promote RDA and its outputs, but also to facilitate the participation of the Europeans to the global activities. At the moment, there are 9 nodes across Europe, but the call is on and there is an expectation of more than 20 nodes by the end of the project in 2 years. Here at CSC, we are hosting the Finnish national node. The national and regional nodes, they are the plugins to RDA global activities. And what do we do in practice is to support the activities that are data related on the national and regional level by joining the events, creating networks and facilitating the Finnish collaboration in the area. We here at CSC act as the central point between the national data practitioners and RDA. By the activities, we want to disseminate the calls that are coming from the RDA Global to the Finnish audience, but also to promote the RDA vision and results through events like these workshops and meetings. We are here also to help you in uptaking and adoption of RDA outputs. So basically dissemination of the outputs and support the adaptation of these. We also want to keep up the dialogue with national funding organizations, but also to represent Finland in the European Governance Board of RDA Europe 4 project. I remember that quite many of you were in our latest national meeting of RDA last October. It was here in Keilaranta, not in this building, but the other one. There we had this small exercise because we were planning to set up a national node and we wanted to find out how do the Finnish participants see the participation for the RDA activities. So we did this gains and pains exercise that some of you might remember. One of the results of this scanning was the question, who are the Finns that are in RDA? And we had a deeper look into it. At the end of April this year, there are 148 members from Finland. This means the people who have signed up as RDA members and have indicated that they are from Finland. 58 of them subscribe to one or more RDA working or interest groups. But we have also a separate Finnish group there that one needs to sign up separately. And that is something that we hope that quite many of you will do after this event. April 2018, we had 2 Finns that were chairs of 5 different working groups and interest groups. I think Ari is responsible of this figure, at least on a major part. But of course, we would like to see more Finns taking an active role in different groups. This is a screenshot from the RDA webpage. They are the national groups. And if you would go to this webpage and you would have been signed into RDA, you would be able to click join this group. This will be in the future the primary channel for dissemination and communications of calls and events in Finland. So I recommend you all to sign up for this national group. So who are the Finns in RDA? This was just very briefly already discussed or seen when we were earlier discussing about the professional distribution, so to say. So students, researchers, and others are quite in a bigger role, but of course there are others as well. Another slide describing what are the primary domains of expertise of Finns that are RDA members. This domain of expertise comes from the tick the box section when you have signed up for RDA. So computer and IT sciences are quite a big portion of the participants, as well as engineering and technology. But of course, we are happy to see diversity such as humanities, economics and business educational sciences as well. So in practice, the Finnish note is about our core team, which is me, then Anni, who is sitting here in the front row, and Jessica Parlan-Tonessen, who is actually participating in this event remotely today. But of course, CSC's pool of expertise is here to help us and support us in finding the right people to help you. The idea of our national node is to collaborate with different kind of institutions, individuals, working groups and other initiatives. And our main goal is to facilitate the Finnish participation to RDA activities. About the RDA recommendations and outputs, one of the main targets of the national nodes is to disseminate and make people aware of the outputs and recommendations there are coming from RDA. But which one should we promote more than others? So are there any specific interests? As we saw earlier, there were so many different recommendations and outputs that the options are either that we at CSC say that, okay, these are the ones that are the most interesting ones, and then we provide them to you. Or we can have a look what are the most interesting outputs and recommendations from RDA from this group's point of view. I was thinking that we could use 5 minutes to a small exercise. There is the list of the recommendations and outputs, and the link was sent to you yesterday with the reminder message. If you have your mobile or your laptop with you, you can open the link of the recommendations and outputs, and then we can do the survey just to have a look. The link to the survey has been added today to this event's webpage. And it is also in very brief format here. This is also a test for your site. Can you see all the way here? But the link is available for the survey on the event's website. And the list of the recommendations is on RDA's webpage. So we can use a few minutes so that everybody scans through the list of recommendations and outputs on RDA's webpage. And after that, you can choose up to 5 recommendations and outputs which you think are the most interesting ones. If you don't have a device with you, we can help you. So a silence of 3 minutes, hard thinking. Sarah, this is what we do in the Finnish Note meetings. We sit together and stay quiet. Let's take just one more minute. I see some serious faces, so bear with me some time. Okay, I think we are done. This is interesting, for me at least, perhaps for some other as well. A quite lightweight survey. You cannot really know much more in detail when you are scanning through such a long list, but this gives us at least an estimate of what are the topics of most interest. Metadata standards directory, workflows for research data publishing, models and key components. We see also data discovery paradigms, user requirements and recommendations, legal and interoperability of research data. Also matrix of use cases and functional requirements for research data repositories, as well as persistent identifier type registry and data citation methodology. We will keep this. RDA EU for a project sets a certain framework for the national nodes, but still we have some room to adjust the content that we provide nationally based on what we find most interesting. And this result of this survey will be used when we plan for our future activities. So our plan in the Finnish national node is to keep you up to date about the calls, the outputs, and the opportunities for participation in RDA. And one of our tasks, of course, is to provide you interesting current topics to think about through. And the decision to have FAIR of one of our main topics this time was done in March. So we have been planning for this event quite a while because we wanted to have somebody else than a Finn to talk about this subject. We have, of course, FAIR competencies within Finland as well, but we have a very interesting speaker today, Sarah Jones from DCC UK, who is also part of EC Data Expert Group. And the next, let's have a look at the schedule. But I think we are not exactly on time, but we still have some good amount of time to spend on the topic. Just a second. Oh. Or actually, at this point, do you have any questions about the national node model or activities, or shall we continue with Sarah? Okay, I think I will give you this one. Just a second.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, excellent. One thing, just picking up on the national node work there, one thing I'd encourage you to do if there are outputs you're interested in, it's worth trying to think about the use cases and how you'd like to implement them, because there will be a cascading grant coming out for the adoption of different RDA outputs. And I was going to try and look quickly what the release date on that is, but I'm pretty sure it's in the next couple of months. So it's worth planning now so that you know what you'd like to apply for, because then you can get funding to do that work. Okay, so I was invited here today to talk about FAIR data, and I think you're probably mostly familiar with the concept, so I won't really dwell on definitions, but I'll give a quick introduction to what FAIR data means. And then I'll focus specifically on the role of the EC's expert group and the recommendations that are coming out from that. So you're getting a bit of a sneak preview. Our report isn't out yet, but it will be published and launched at the EOSC Summit next Monday. And then I'm going to touch on the role of RDA as well in implementing FAIR. So first off, FAIR is a set of principles. It's really describing the attributes that data need to have so that they can be reused both by humans and machines. So really FAIR is about thinking about how we share data and sharing data in a way that makes it meaningful and reusable by others. And although the concept of FAIR was coined in 2014 and came out of a workshop in the life sciences, the underlying principles in it aren't really anything new. Communities have been developing frameworks for sharing their data and standards to follow for a number of years. And when you look at previous policies like the OECD principles or the Royal Society report that came out in 2012, you see that similar concepts to FAIR have been around for a while. The Royal Society report, for example, talks about intelligent openness, describing that it's not good enough just to make data open. They need to be open in a way that's meaningful so that others can understand the data, they can make assessments about whether the data is fit for their purpose, and they're able to reuse it. And those concepts come out in FAIR as well. It's about making sure the data are understandable to others. So I think what FAIR's really done is to capture the imagination and to come up with a very clear acronym that people are engaged by and motivated by. So I was asked to speak about open and fair and data management at a conference a couple of months ago, and I've included a couple of observations here because I think it gives us some ideas about the implementation of FAIR. So one of the kind of defining lines I would say is that managing data is applicable across the board, whether the data are shared or not. You need to manage your data as you're doing your research, whether you decide to keep them in the long term or whether they'll be disposed of. Whereas open and fair are really about the ways in which we're sharing data. Are we making sure that it's discoverable, that others are able to understand the data? Are we licensing it in an open way? And I think this is important because it speaks to the motivations and how we make the case to researchers to manage their data or to make it open and fair. Because when we're thinking about data management, there's a lot more of a self-interest there. You know, managing your data is beneficial to you because you can find and use your content. Whereas when we're asking researchers to make their data open or fair, it's more of a societal benefit. It's in the interests of the research in that community. And I think this is really critical because what we need to do to encourage people to be open and fair is to build those incentives and the recognition and rewards that have been alluded to earlier on today. And at the moment, they are lacking in many cases. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done around that to really help with embedding fair and open practices. And the other reason I was kind of drawing these out is because the concepts of fair and open are often conflated. People sometimes think they mean the same thing. And in one sense, we could think of open data being a subset of FAIR, that it's not all data can be made open, but I think that's a little bit simplistic. So I tried to model it a different way, thinking about the overlaps. So ideally, data would be both fair and open, but not all data can be made openly available because of the nature of the content. There might be restrictions around reuse because it's sensitive material or there are commercial applications. But we should still be making the data fair. We should still be making it reusable by others. So data can be both open and fair. It doesn't matter which really, but ideally we'd have it both. And I think the other thing we need to realize about open and fair is that both are on a scale. So you have degrees of openness, and there's a really nice 5-star open data model. And in the Fair Data Expert Group, we tried to do the same with FAIR. We've taken the 15 principles and we've tried to say, what is the base level? What is it that you really need at a very minimal level to be fair? And how do we then enrich the content to make it more reusable? So that's a little bit of just definition and background to explain the concept I'm speaking about. What I want to focus on is the work we've done within the European Commission's expert group. We've been running just over a year now, and I'll speak about our remit in a moment, but we were extended for a second year because they wanted us to develop a fair data action plan. So Simon Hodson from CoData chairs the group. We've got Leif as well on the group, who's actually, because he's going to be finishing shortly, going off for retirement. But there are a number of members from lots of different countries. And our remit has been to develop recommendations on what needs to be done to turn fair data into reality and to propose indicators to measure that. And we decided quite early on that we didn't want to tackle each element of FAIR separately. We didn't want to look at the findability and then the accessibility, because there's a lot of blurring across those concepts. So we wanted to address it holistically and think about what's needed overall for the data and for the ecosystem to support FAIR. As I said, we were extended for a second year. Initially, we were asked to feed into an action plan for the EOSC, but we're actually developing a fair data action plan which addresses the EC and member states and the international level, but we also speak specifically about how that informs EOSC. We did some work around data management plans in the Horizon 2020 context. We did a survey last year and we published the findings in a separate report on that this spring. So I'm not going to speak about that today. And then we're also looking at the financing to support FAIR as well. So the report that will come out next week has 7 sections. It's ended up being quite a long report. It's 80-odd pages because we talk about a lot of background. So we talk about what it means to be fair, why it's important to make data fair, and the history of this, because we want to look at what we can learn from different research communities that have adopted practices that align with FAIR. And then the 2 main sections of the report, we talk about the culture, so research cultures, and the technical requirements, so what's needed in the ecosystem. We address the skills, both in terms of research community skills and the support staff skills, how we measure the change and build those incentives and rewards, and then also how we fund this. And the report closes with an action plan. So the recommendations come up throughout the report and we draw those together at the end to develop the action plan. And as I was mentioning earlier, we wanted to approach the report holistically, and the 2 main sections look at the culture and the technology. We recognize that science is inherently cultural. You know, the different communities have their norms and their practices. But there's a lot of technological dependency there. And you need to address those 2. They're so deeply intertwined, you need to really address them together. You can't just build a system and hope that it fits. You need to make sure it meets the research needs. And similarly, you know, we need to understand that research community practice as well. So those two sections of the report, they cross-reference quite a lot. And then in terms of the action plan, how we structured it, we tried to keep all the recommendations short so that they could be tweeted, and to underpin them with a number of actions that we've assigned to different stakeholder groups. So naturally, research communities are one group, data services. We've also addressed global coordination fora, so groups like the RDA or Force 11 or CoData, because we think it's really important. FAIR, you know, research is global, the implementation of FAIR should be global. So it's important that we build consensus not just within certain countries or disciplines, but internationally. So the report and the action plan applies to the EC and member states, but also to the international level. And there are a number of parallel FAIR initiatives going on. It's not just the EC addressing this. So as I mentioned, the report's quite long, and we actually ended up with 30-odd recommendations. But we pulled out 14 kind of primary recommendations at the start of the action plan and grouped these around 4 steps. And that's what I want to walk through. So first off, I think the FAIR concept at a high level is really well understood, what the 4 elements are. But actually the implementation of that and what it means within different research communities and different practices still needs, more definition and more fleshing out. So the first step is really to define and apply FAIR appropriately, and pick up on, related concepts like openness. And what we do is we put forward a model for FAIR data objects. So a number of commentators have picked up on things that are missing or maybe overlooked from the FAIR definition, and we've suggested that within the existing principles we expand and reference these concepts. We don't think the acronym should be expanded. We shouldn't have FAIR TLC or something broader because FAIR is very strong in its own right. But we do need to allude to things like openness and say that data should be appropriately open. It can't always be open, but we should be open where possible. We need to be able to assess the data, this notion that comes out of the Royal Society report. People need to be able to make value judgments. And it's really important if it's not just being able to find the data, but we need to make sure that the data is properly stewarded in the long term so that it remains accessible over time. So that preservation angle needs to come out more within the principles. We also reference timely sharing. In certain communities or where there are disaster situations, it's important that the data are shared quickly so that we can respond. And also we need to make selections about which data should be kept and which data should be made fair. And overall, the FAIR principles, they deal with the technical sides very well, but interoperability covers other aspects as well, like legal interoperability too. So there are a number of concepts that we think need to be expanded within the existing FAIR definition. And as I mentioned before, we need to think about what it means for different research communities to be fair, because the data types and the practices vary across those communities. And I'll mention in a few slides another recommendation we have, which is about supporting communities to develop their interoperability frameworks. What does it mean to share data in different domains? And in terms of open data, as I mentioned at the outset, FAIR doesn't mean open. But we think that the two need to go hand in hand. We need to be encouraging open data as well. So that mandate needs to be explicit. But we really reference the maxim from the European Commission that it's as open as possible, as closed as necessary. And there should be best efforts to share. So we need to think about what the boundaries of open are. When is it legitimate not to share? It's not just a kind of excuse to get out of the sharing. And I mentioned that we put forward a kind of model for FAIR data objects. At a very base level, obviously, you've got the data. But for that data to be meaningful, it needs a lot of layers of context. So identifiers at a very basic level, you need at least identifiers for the data, but ideally identifiers for the other concepts, identifiers for the researchers who are involved, or for the projects or other research resources that are used. The data should be in standard formats that are defined by the different communities, ideally open formats. And the metadata as well should be to standards so that it can be understood, so that it's interoperable. And here the code, if there's code that's needed to process and analyze the data, that should also be shared, and again should be following relevant standards. And in terms of the metadata, there are again various layers here. At a very basic level, you at least need the discovery metadata, but you need all of the context to explain the provenance of the data, how it's been processed, why was this data created, by whom. So in the FAIR definitions, they talk about this plurality of relevant attributes, that you need as much rich context as possible. And clearly the licensing as well, so a clear and accessible usage license. So we're thinking about FAIR as being kind of layered objects. You need all of this context, and at a very basic level, you have the discovery metadata and an identifier for the data, but really you want much richer context than that to get those higher levels or degrees of FAIR. So once you've defined FAIR for your context, we also need the ecosystem to support FAIR. So we need a range of services. And we tried to define what the common components are of the services. So naturally, we need policies that define and regulate both the services, the requirements on researchers. We reference DMPs, data management plans, really to provide a hub of information on the different FAIR data objects that are being created, what standards are being used, where they're being stored, what repositories, for example. Identifiers, as I was mentioning before, should be assigned to various different objects, both the data, but also the people involved, the different systems that are being used. And similarly, the standards apply in many different cases. It's the standards for the data, for the metadata, standards for the services that are being used. We want services to be certified as well, things like Cortra Seal for repositories. And then the repositories are the other common building block. We need appropriate places to store the data to ensure that they are discoverable and interoperable. And for each of these components, we need registries that can talk to one another so that we can be exchanging information across this FAIR data ecosystem in an automated way as much as possible. And around the outside, we try to allude to the cultural aspects too. It's not just the technology that matters. We need to ensure that people have the appropriate skills, that there are metrics so that we're recognizing and rewarding FAIR data practices and the appropriate certified services that are in place, and that we're investing in this ecosystem overall. So the components of this ecosystem need to be sustainably funded, if we're going to ensure that FAIR data are preserved over time and remain accessible. And we've suggested, this kind of aligns with what's happening in EOSC, which is about federating existing services, that funders are consolidating and building on those existing investments, but making sure that they demonstrate impact and are meeting the community needs. The third step is kind of ensuring that the data is robust and the services themselves are certified and trusted. And this is where we bring in this notion of interoperability frameworks. So within the report, we look at practices in a number of different communities, so in linguistics research and in astronomy, and how those different communities have come together to define data sharing frameworks effectively. What it means, what the practices are for data management and sharing, what the community agreements are in terms of when data will be shared and how, the kind of formats that are accepted by that community, and the metadata standards and infrastructure that are in use. And we've defined this as the kind of the blocks that are there within an interoperability framework. And we suggest that different research communities are supported to develop these frameworks. Now, there's a slight risk there that if you're building everything by the different disciplines, you end up with a number of silos. But it is important that we support communities to work within their given practices. But what we suggest is kind of two recommendations here about the interoperability frameworks, that we're supporting them on a community level, but we're also making sure that those frameworks that are developed are articulated in common ways and adopt global standards so that we support interdisciplinary research as well. And I think there's a really important role for groups like the Research Data Alliance here, because as these frameworks are being developed, we need to be working across the different communities to pick out those common threads and elements and to have kind of base level standards that are used so that we can have that overall interoperability, not just within certain research communities. The other aspect of this is looking at the service side, making sure we've got metrics both for the data and for the certification of services. And for the FAIR data objects, I mentioned we've kind of got this 5-star scale of FAIR. We've suggested starting from that very base level of at least having descriptive metadata, identifiers, and access to the data as the very base level of FAIR that's needed. But clearly we want the data to be much more rich and reusable than that. And in terms of the services that are in place, there are already really solid certification schemes for data repositories, so the Core Trust Seal, for example, and we recommend that that's adopted rather than having some kind of different FAIR certification framework for repositories. But there aren't certification frameworks for all of the components of the FAIR data ecosystem, so how we certify identifier services or metadata services and standards and vocabularies. So we need to think about ways to certify those, and they can draw on aspects of Core Trust Seal and aspects of FAIR to ensure that those services themselves are discoverable and interoperable too. So we recommend that frameworks are developed for that, so we can make sure that both the data are FAIR and also the services are trusted and certified. And then the final step is about embedding a culture of FAIR practice in different research communities. And in many senses, this is the most important aspect because it's about the actual practice that's going on. But I think in order to support that practice, we need to make sure that we've got the models and the services in place. And here, one of the things we really stress is the importance of data management, so that researchers, it should just be part of every project that's being undertaken, that the data are properly managed. And we recommend that this is done through the data management plan, but that the data management plan plays a greater role, and it's something that's regularly updated, so it is this hub of information about the different FAIR data objects, and that we're using the information within the DMPs. So it's structured in a way that we're connecting up between the different FAIR data ecosystem components and exchanging information across them. In terms of the roles for support, we propose 2 cohorts of professionals. Data scientists, as Ari was mentioning earlier on, so people who are involved in the experimental design, the analysis and visualization of the data, and also data stewards who are going to support the curation of the data. And what we kind of stress in the report is that these roles will sometimes be blurred. You know, you might have somebody who's helping with the analysis, but is also taking on some of the data steward responsibilities within a particular research group, or data stewards maybe in national level data services as well. And there are already some existing training courses for these different cohorts of professionals, but we need to coordinate and systematize that training, because at the moment it isn't always formal training, it isn't accredited, and we really need to professionalize these roles because people aren't necessarily rewarded for this work. And this was mentioned before by Heidi. You know, if people are going to get credit for that, you know, you need to recognize it. And this really draws us to the final recommendation, that we need to start to recognize the data itself as an output, not just the publications, and recognize researchers for making their data FAIR, because it is additional work really. It's a lot more to make sure your data are well documented and shared in an appropriate way. So that needs to form part of the career progression and the different frameworks or assessment methods you have within academia. And similarly, the provision of data-related services also needs to be recognized, because if you don't have the ecosystem there, then you can't support the FAIR data objects. And what we propose is that funders and other groups require evidence of FAIR. So when they're asking for, you know, your 5 publications, they need to be looking to check that you've actually been FAIR with the way that you shared your data, or that the services that are being offered are accredited and certified, and reward accordingly. So use that to direct future investment. So the next steps for the expert group, we're launching our report next week at the EOSC Summit, and then we're consulting on it over summer. So this is an interim report. We have an online platform where we're inviting comments on the recommendations and the report. We'll also be running webinars and speaking at different events. And then we'll be revising the report for the final publication, which is in November at the Austrian presidency. So just to close, I wanted to pick out some points where RDA plays a role in this, because I think if FAIR's to be successful, it needs to be based on global agreements, not just individual countries or research communities. It needs to be global. And RDA is an ideal forum to discuss a number of the points that come out of our report. So we mentioned the need to clarify the definitions of FAIR, to pick up on some of those aspects like openness or the stewardship. I think RDA is a really good forum to provide a space for the different research communities to develop their interoperability frameworks, but also to map across those to identify the commonalities so that we can have global standards at the base of these different data sharing frameworks. And RDA already does a lot of work to promote good practice and exchange lessons, and you heard that come out of the kind of personal stories of how people have engaged in RDA. So I think there's a lot of potential for RDA to collect use cases and examples of implementations of FAIR. And I've given some examples here. For example, they can look at what it means to be fair in different disciplines, or to explore the appropriate boundaries of open. When is it legitimate not to share? And I think on the service side, there's already been some really good work done through RDA on things like core trust seal. And I think it would be good to explore more how we certify other services and how we test that the ecosystem is fit for purpose overall. It's not just testing individual components or building blocks, but that the overall works and there aren't gaps. And you've already seen in the pack that there are lots of RDA outputs. Many of those are relevant to FAIR data. So obviously we want to be pointing researchers to relevant services. How do they know what repositories are available to them, or what standards can be used? And there are different catalogs like Re3 Data or FAIR Sharing or the Metadata Standards catalog that can be used. There's already a lot of work around the skills side, so the training courses in data science, or the community of practice that's starting to be formed to provide data stewards with a forum to share. And as I mentioned, there's already certification frameworks like Core Trust Seal that we can build on. And the final point about RDA, the Commission's vision for our Fair Data Action Plan is that this is really like a rubric or a hub plan. And what then happens is that different countries and different research communities think about how that applies in their context. So where we make a recommendation, for example, about the interoperability frameworks, those communities go away and they think about, well, what do we have in place? Do we have common formats and metadata standards, or what are the gaps? Where do we need to develop more work? And this is actually how we'll be framing our workshop next week at the EOSC Summit. We're going to group people according to countries and disciplines and ask them to start to explore, how that plan will develop within their own community. And I think this is a potential role for RDA as well, and for the nodes. You're already looking at what happens on a Finnish national level. Potentially you could think about what's needed to implement FAIR in Finland too. So that's all I had to cover. Hopefully I've kept the time for you, but I'm happy to take any questions too.
Thank you, Sarah. Is this microphone on?
I think so.
Yes, no, maybe. Thank you. That was very interesting indeed. By the way, can we share this presentation?
Yeah, of course.
You will share it later on. We have actually scheduled a commentary for Leif. Yes, and perhaps we can take some questions after that also from the remote participants. Please, Leif.
I guess it's close enough for. Thanks a lot, and I hope everybody understands that we were really the first ones to get the report in this detail as we have had today. So I hope you appreciate the effort that we were. We were really privileged. Okay, I have a few comments on this and on perhaps on other things as well as I usually have. And I'm not going to go into details what Sarah was very successfully talking here. I think I'm taking you a bit higher. I'm taking the helicopter view or sitting on the moon where people claim I'm quite often sitting by myself. But now I have the opportunity to publicly express what I'm talking on the moon. Anyway, I think one of the central theme which came through Sarah's presentation is the word or the action of trust. The activities is depending on how successfully we will be able to build trust. And there is trust building on very, very many different levels. And I think the recommendations which you just saw are in a way showing the dimensions of the trust building we have to achieve. And this takes me to the question which I made to Ari and Heidi already earlier about I don't think that you can build trust nationally and then take it to a global level and expect that everybody accepts the trust you have built on a national level, that everybody else will accept it. I think you need to build the trust already from the beginning on a global level. I'm not saying that we in Finland should talk with everybody on the globe. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the trust building should be made through organizations like RDA and CoData and other organizations, but the development in a way should be reflected all the time to global trust building. And I'm not sure that's really always happening, so that's why I want to emphasize on that. To come a bit down, perhaps, I think the trust building is happening. If you think as the activities like the famous pyramid, where you have on, I don't know, on top we can put the researchers, and on down you have service providers and funders. All the activities in a way happens between these three different partners or parties. The researchers who are funded by someone or some organization and service providers. We can't deny the fact that Europe is, I'm not saying full, but we have a lot of service providers that provide different service functions that supports the researcher in his or her work and also talking to the funder. But the trust building between these three different partners in a way has not always been as successful, I think, as it should have been. And I think FAIR now provides us with a tool or a platform again which initiates the discussion between these three partners, the researcher, service provider, and the funder. And I think we have a sort of a new start, which has to be done right this time. We can't afford to do this wrong, that there is some mistrust between these three, because if we create that, the field will be very, very difficult to repair over the coming years. Why is this important? And I think it's important because some of the exercises which have been done over the last years show that a researcher is using up to 80% of his or her time for curating the data. I mean, think about 80% of the time going just to handle the data which the researcher has already created, and the potential which could be used if not so much time would go for just maintaining the data. So we really need to create a concept where the service provider and the funder and the researcher comes up with a landscape where the researcher really can devote more of his or her time to really the research work and not do the mechanical work of maintaining or creating the data. This also brings the question back to what are the primary purpose of a researcher? Is the primary purpose of a researcher to make a PhD, or is it the purpose is to, I don't know, create something good for the society, and or something else in between? And I think sometimes this is a bit of a blurry picture, which reflects on again that the views on the data by the researcher is not really fully clear. The service providers, again, have not always done a very good work in being able to provide those services a researcher really needs. So the dialogue between the research field and the service providers has not been very good. The funders, I think they are the pillars again of running the full system. And there needs to be some new channels, I think, created that the funders understand. I'm not always sure the funders really understand what they are funding. So something needs to be created there. Okay, I was already saying that FAIR is a fair framework for doing this. I think it puts in new things that on the table for discussion, and like Sarah was describing in the report, I think there are some key questions that really need to be resolved. Yeah. The importance, I think I'm running shortly out of time, so I will be summarizing up. I only have about 15 pages left, so I think this is urgent also. Nobody has really been talking about the European Open Science Cloud, which is in a way the framework here, which makes things complicated also in a way, because from my point of view, this is my opinion, I'm not necessarily CSC's or somebody else's view, but my view is that we are in a very, very strange situation where the upper policy level is really pushing things fiercely forward in a way where nobody really understands where we will end up in the long run. But for sure, I know we are in a situation that the need or the push from the political level is so high that something is going to happen. And if we don't all contribute to this work, we might end up on the moon. So I might get some other people up on the moon when I'm sitting there. So the risk is really, really high. As you know, the European Open Science Cloud, which where the FAIR stuff comes in as one of the important cornerstones, that's going to be announced later in the autumn, and starting from the beginning of next year. And as far as I know, it's been up on both the Competitiveness Council and the European Council. So it's coming back to the member states. So Finland has to take a standpoint on the European Open Science Cloud. So in Finland, our people in the ministry and other places, they really have to take a standpoint. It's a national thing. How are we going to work with the European Open Science Cloud? And that's something which we all need to push on the funders also to understand that there is big things going to happen. To cope with this, I have been suggesting a few times, and we have been talking with Riina and some other people as well, a lot, that in a small country like Finland, we really need to have some kind of central help desk hub for the functions of CoData, EOSC, FAIR, RDA, World Data Systems, because I mean, the few scientists in the audience might know, but I would say that 90% of the scientists out in the field, they don't really know with whom should I talk. I mean, RDA sounds interesting, World Data Systems sounds interesting, but to whom should I talk? And I think in one or another way, we need to create some kind of help desk function where we can direct the questions and questions about actions or questions about other things, because otherwise it will just disappear in the space. And I think this is quite urgent as well, that we need to come together and create some kind of hub. I'm not saying that CSC is the place. We could perhaps do it, not it alone, but we could do it with the help of others. But we need to create that hub of help desk. That's absolutely essential. And I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Leif. I think we have now some time for comments and questions, both for Sarah and Leif.
Hello, my name is Marilsa Kusnemi and I come from University of Helsinki. For Leif, I would like to say that I think the Finnish funders are quite they understand well importance of data and FAIR. Academia Finland is requiring openness, and they are funding data stewardship for opening data. But the universities are not as well aware of this subject. There is one exception, and it's University of Turku. I would like to congratulate Turku University, who gave 4 million euros for data, the research groups opening the data, and I think this is the way that other universities should follow as well. So I think the problem is not the funders. The biggest gap between the action and the FAIR is not the funders, but the research organizations who don't actually support research data management services and opening the data. But Turku, we need to follow them.
Thank you.
Maybe even from the Netherlands. I think you're right that financial incentives are definitely good. Having support in place. Some countries have like Some countries have data prizes, and I think actually recognizing and rewarding the fair practices or good data management practices is really critical, because otherwise we're given essentially an unfunded mandate. So why would researchers do it? It's not going to progress their career.
Hello, Marjut Kaukolehto, University of Helsinki. I have concerns, and I'm very happy that Leif already addressed them, and also Sarah in a presentation. This cultural issue extremely important. I know large research communities where they have no idea of the importance of metadata. They don't even have machine-readable databases. So this high-level talk here is completely in vain. They don't have any idea of the RDI, or they don't have, from all these nice recommendations, any idea which of them to approach, which would be good for them. So there is only this kind of self-interest, and the motivation is extremely important. Why would I start to apply these very good principles now? So there is much more education and teaching needed. And otherwise, or say that you have to do this, or then you vanish. So incentives in both ways. Your visibility increases if you do this, or you vanish. And I think there are very different use kind of cases. You have research infrastructure framework, and from there, everything has to be in place. When you go in a way down in the quality and appliance, there are different data producer technicians working for an institute or for a site PI or site data manager, and then you have an individual researcher. And I think all these need different kind of approach, how to help.
This, I guess, is this on? Yeah, that's what I mean with the trust. You know, the trust includes incentives and it includes other things as well. And I think what you're saying is that with some science disciplines we haven't really started the discussion yet, even started. And I'm also very worried about this because there are some spearhead disciplines that they have partially done this already, but there are lots of disciplines that don't really understand what we are talking about. And this is really a main worry, and that's it's sort of lack of trust as well, because when those people don't understand what we are talking about, and we are bravely going out with our jargon, we don't create that kind of bridge. And I don't know if Sarah has a good solution to this, but.
This is why we've stressed the notion of interoperability frameworks and getting research communities together to develop those, because I think researchers respect their peers. So if they come together as a community to develop, you know, their methods for sharing, their formats, their metadata standards, that's when it will then become embedded. You know, it can't be a top-down thing, it can't be a policy directive. But I think, like Leif was saying, it's worrying that in some communities this really hasn't been started. And this is why we're saying that we have to give support to those communities to develop those frameworks, because otherwise the life sciences or communities that have already spent a number of years developing that will just shoot ahead. And some of the policies that are coming out talking about, you can only use certified services or your data have to be certified as FAIR. It's risky if for some communities, there aren't standards to use. So we have to make sure that everybody's on a level playing field, and that those that have more work to do, to define what it means to be fair, to define what standards should be used, are actually supported to do that. Otherwise, there'll be some communities that get left behind.
Very shortly, I think interoperability is not the right way to start because they are on the level that they have to first get their own stuff in place before they can start to be even interested in interoperability issues. There has to be other kind of motivations for them. They are not interested maybe on a side discipline on a side, but their own thing.
Just one last very quick comment from Pekka, and then we'll go on with the program.
Hey, so Pekka Orponen, Aalto University and the Finnish Committee for Research Data. So thanks for an excellent presentation and sort of a wonderful discussion for Leif to kind of a very kind of valid and insightful points. So I kind of two comments on the kind of the situation, then maybe a good word for Finland. For Finland. So now I realize it's quite true that there is this kind of this sort of a tense situation somehow. This great political push to kind of implement these things and do this quickly, and there will be lots of kind of EU funding coming in this direction. And then there's kind of this very kind of uneven situation with respect to research communities, and as we have heard. So, but now somehow, okay, so now we are the stewards of this transition. And now it's challenging, but it's somehow us who should somehow take care of this, somehow kind of attending to all these political issues and organizational issues, and then kind of bring the research communities abroad in a somehow appropriate way. So, okay, so we should really pay attention to how this transition can be managed. It cannot be just left. I mean, one can just kind of leave things as they are, but then it will not lead to good outcomes. So it's kind of our task now. And then the kind of good word for Finland. So Finland is a small, generally speaking, very well organized country. So we have been thinking about these things at the national level for a long time. And I think I would think that we sort of know how this transition should be managed, but now we should do it. But happily we have had this we had this ATT project, we have heard about this UNIFI kind of implementation project, and now there's a kind of a implementation of that, which I think Lea will talk about in just a little while. So now we should use this the capabilities that we have kind of to somehow take responsibility for the stewardship task. It's challenging, but we cannot just leave things to be there. And somehow, and of course, I really like this Leif's idea that there should be kind of some kind of a help desk. So I've also sometimes been reminded of there was a saying when Europe was very kind of in a bad state, and Henry Kissinger so sort of when asked about collaboration with Europe, so he said, okay, so what's Europe's phone number? So I would similarly like to ask, I mean, we need a phone number for open science. So
I think that was something quite concrete, maybe to take up. Thank you both, Leif and Sarah. I think these comments and Leif's comments brought it quite nicely to the national level. And here we have the next presentation will be from Lea Ryynänen-Karjalainen, who is the Executive Director of Finnish Learned Societies. Finnish Learned Societies is a national cooperative body for learned societies that includes 275 different societies and 4 academies from all branches of arts and sciences. In total, there are 250,000 individual members. And I think learned societies have taken quite nicely on the new process in the open science field as well. So happy to hear about how it
works. Hello, everyone, and thank you for building pressures on our shoulders. I think that the question of what will happen after ATT project or initiative was raised by quite many people already a year ago. From the Federation's point of view, we presented the question at least partly because we were involved in certain projects in the initiative. One of our main tasks has been to support scientific publications, for instance, by distributing state support to the publications. And we were presented by the Ministry of Education the question whether we would be interested in taking more charge. And I must say that personally, word data is a bit something I'm not very familiar with. I'm a musician by my background, a church musician, and first I thought that when I looked at all the topics that had been handled during the initiative and what sort of things had been done, there had been produced excellent documents, excellent discussions had been produced and developed, etc. And maybe some of the dark moments during the nights, I realized that okay, as a musician, I have also some sort of materials I work with. Maybe we don't call them data, but for instance, manuscripts. We read them, we find mistakes or question marks, whether Jean Sibelius thought is this that a writing mistake or is this the first version and then he created something else and so on. But on the other hand, personally, this has been an interesting thing to bring the scientific societies in a new situation. We probably haven't realized, as Rina mentioned, that what sort of possibilities we have to create that trust and bring researchers and the society together to discuss what's the meaning of open science for the whole society, and from our point of view, the question of cultural importance and the cultural change amongst the science community has been one of the key issues we have wanted to raise and will raise. But what have we done so far? I won't have answers to all the questions. We have pointed out the same issues that have been mentioned here several times, so I won't probably say anything new. But I can tell what we have done and what we are going. What are the next steps we will do? So far, as I mentioned, we started to discussion with the Ministry of what will happen after the initiative, and there were several issues, and the coordination was one of the things we pointed out. We were first sort of offered some concrete things, but quite soon the question of coordination was raised out, and that's why we participated in the UNIFI project, which was very important to hear the universities' thoughts and what sort of priorities universities have, and also to see that universities there are big differences between each other, as it was mentioned here, that there are fields of science that they are only in the beginning of they thinking what open science means. And in that sense, federation is quite a good place to help fields of research to show those fields who are somewhere longer in their discussions and their thoughts to bring their good practices and good examples to those who are just beginners. During the ATD, as I said, the ATD project was concentrated on universities. At the same time, we started conversations with other actors we found important to reach, and although Ministry of Education had given us a mandate to coordinate and to develop actions, we wanted to be sure that the whole science community accepts this. We wanted to get the mandate from the science community, not only from the ministry. ATT projects, I dare to say a problem was probably that, as it was mentioned, that it was a high-level discussion. There were very good results in many sense, but we need to bring the discussion down and think what a researcher thinks and how he or she feels. and we have had several interesting discussions about the coordination, the issues that should be raised, how to prioritize, how to organize things, and we have also tried to participate in all sorts of open science events, just to hear the talk. What sort of things people are interested in. One of the first concrete things been done so far was that the website of avointiede.fin, openscience.fin, was transferred from CSC to the Federation. So we have changed the website, how it looks, the content, reorganized it, and hopefully can together develop it a place where you can find that telephone number and all these help desk services. We'll see. We have defined some foundations for the coordination, and it's clear that everything that's done in the coordination has to be open and accessible. It's a clear principle for the whole thing. We want to emphasize people and activities. I think this is one of the basic things when we want to create the trust Leif mentioned. Technology is important. This is very, as we could see in Sarah's presentation, this is very, in other presentation, this is very technology-oriented thing. But we have to remember people, the individual researchers, individual service people, administrators, all participants. We think that open science is part of responsible science, and in that way should be seen as part of the bigger picture. We cooperate Federation very closely to the research ethics delegation and everyone here from Finland knows TENK as well as tiedon julkistamisen neuvottelukunta. We cooperate with them and can bring their knowledge and expertise to this discussion. And as I mentioned, this is a question of cultural change. We are here believers, followers, but there are plenty of people outside there for whom this is a really big change in everything they have done so far. And it's also a question of diversity. This is a very heterogeneous group of people and actors. We have set some key aims. As I said, this is a frame for what we hopefully can create during the coming 2-3 years. This doesn't happen. I know this is urgent. We all worry, and there are many things that should be done now, but it takes time. But we need a clear vision based on what was created in ATT project, and the vision has to be a kind that all participants can advance it in their own activities. We need coordination, communication between all the stakeholders, projects and interest groups to avoid overlapping. or contradiction. So far, we have noticed that we have, how should I say it? Ari said something. You mentioned something about this when you were talking about this. I asked about these resources, how RDA is financed. People, the most of the people work on a voluntary basis, and that's wonderful. But there's often the question that how I find time to distribute what I've done as a voluntary person, how to find all the channels and how to reach those who need the information I have. And this is a clearly one thing we need, this coordination, and we have to pay attention to this coordination. We don't want to create a terrible and administrative jungle. And this is one of the things why we want to continue discussion with the key players. The interesting thing is, of course, that who are the key players. We have made a long list of all the actors we should be able to discuss. But I believe that we'll find a good solution. Already in this UNIFIS RDA project, we had some ideas, as Heidi will probably mention this or not, it's up to you. But we had some discussions about the structure, how it should be, the coordination should be created, and as an example, the CSC's position as a node, national node, is very important. How we find the way to work. The role of TSV of Federation has to be well defined and managed. We have had our own strategy process going on at the same time, beside these discussions of the coordination, and in that we have very strongly pointed out our role in the science community. We have probably been somewhere there as an ancient relic from 1899. But I believe that we have the capacity to change, just because we have nearly 300 member organizations and all this amount of young and older researchers and people who are interested in science. Okay, I have 3 minutes. Incorporating existing projects, that's extremely important. We have some very well working structures already, national committees. We have research projects like Research Information Hub going on. How do we combine all these things that there won't be overlapping or gaps? This is a big question. Sufficient resources. We all have noticed that open science is not that cheap. There are needs for infrastructures, needs for support for researchers, for organizations. At the moment, at the Federation, we have one person just appointed, Henrikka Mustajoki, who is appointed as a development manager for open science. And I use 1/4 of my left arm for this thing. So we have pointing out this also to the ministry. But it's not a question only of the federation, it's a question of all of you. Challenges, all these things and more have been mentioned already here today, so I won't go this list. Maybe the last point, individual incentives. Why a researcher would do this? Why? Next steps. We will continue the discussions. We have a couple of meetings, for instance, with the ministry before the midsummer, and some other actors, and then we continue after summer holidays. Our aim is to be able to find an agreement of the structure before the end of this year, hopefully October, November. We are planning to have a national seminar. It's November 19th. So put that in your calendars. The decision-making structure there must be people who have, how do you say in English? In Finnish, riittävän isot saappaat, big boots enough, so that they have power and mandate to make decisions and create the commitment of their own organizations. So it's not for coffee drinking or tea drinking. It has to be able to make decisions, and it has to be able to bring the ideas from the scientific community to the ministry. Ministry doesn't want to lead this. It has clearly said that this is now for you. Take care. But we have to find the way to bring the ideas, the proposals to the ministry, which has its own way to guide and make contracts with CSC, with the universities, with Academy of Finland, with other actors who are the players here. So this is a challenge for the whole scientific community to find the ways to be able to find its way to say that this is what we want. I guess this is here. We continue, and I can say that you can call me and you can call Henrika. There are 2 phone numbers this time, but here we are now, and I believe that this will work. It just needs a lot of work. Thank you.
Yes, I have to first say thank you, and the second thing is that it is a lot of work, but you are brave enough, obviously, to take up that work.
You're stupid enough, but
yeah. We have scheduled a commentary for Heidi, but perhaps we will have one comment before. What's the directive?
Short question. Yes. You were talking about the ministry, one ministry, contract with academy and universities. We are missing almost half of the Finnish research life.
I know.
Through Ministry of Transport and Communications, providing a lot of data, and also other ministries who should be very strongly engaged in this whole research data business.
Yeah, I fully agree, and
Okay,
that's one of the interesting things, that how to make ministries communicate to each other. So that's a challenge, but we have very good contacts and discussions have had so far with Tulanet. So, but that's a real issue.
Okay. Yeah. So I think we will let Heidi give her views as well. I think this is one of those hats you mentioned earlier. We have that one.
Not the smoothest transition, but so just a few quick notes, since we're almost at the end of the program. I won't take too much of your time because a lot of the points that I'm about to make is there. I cannot change the slide, so I won't stand in the way of the slides. A lot of what I want to say has already been said today, so this is, I guess, fittingly a summary to a large extent. So Lea mentioned this Finnish University Rectors Council UNIFI's Open Science and Data Action Plan, that was just published at the end of May, and I was working on that project and to a large degree responsible for that action plan. But I'm not here today to evangelize about that. I have moved on and hopefully the work will carry on its own. And Lea said that a hell of a lot of work needs to be done, which is a true statement, but a lot of work has already been done, and I would like to just a little bit contradict the narrative that it is the university's action plan, because the funding for the project came from the Ministry of Education and Culture with the task of creating an action plan for the whole Finnish research community. The timeline was of course very challenging, just 5 months this spring, but we did our best. There was a stakeholder workshop that had a lot of attendance from many stakeholders, in addition to universities, and of course there were these bilateral meetings and negotiations as well. So I hope that when we go forward, we don't primarily evaluate the action plan on the basis of the process, but on the content. So, but that's what I want to say about that. So now to the Finnish Committee of Research Data point of view to this life after RDA, the Open Science and Research Initiative. What is Finnish Committee for Research Data? That's already been pretty much covered. So we're a national committee of co-data, and we're part of this Finnish Science Academy's network of international relations. And we've existed since 2015, and since then we've hosted quite a few events on research data issues, especially on research data citation and research data infrastructure. And we've also created a research data citation roadmap for Finland. That was also a small project funded by the Ministry of Education and Culture. Pekka Orponen, who is the chair, and myself as the secretary, we were invited to become members of the co-data data citation standards and practices task group, and I've been also personally invited to be a member of the co-data international data policy committee. So we've been able to bring the voice of the Finnish research community to these international discussions. So I think during these years we've established that there is a need for this kind of action and facilitation of these research data discussions and bridging the international and national levels. But it's not been easy, and I'm sorry to say that it's not the most sustainable way of working. We have during these past years learned a concept called unfunded mandate, which describes very well where we're at with the Finnish Committee for Research Data. Our annual budget is around 5,000 euros, which is largely spent on travels we've been to Research Data Alliance meetings, and then of course the biannual or is it triannual? Anyway, to the co-data General Assembly, where we have one vote as the Finnish national member, and the next General Assembly is in Botswana during the International Data Week. We don't have any legal status. Many these national committees of different members of the International Council of Science, ICSU, they operate as part of some discipline-specific learned society, but because these data issues they encompass all disciplines, there is no this kind of natural home for us in any learned society. So we're just basically floating there in the air, which is a challenge if we want to start something specific, a project or similar. With the data citation project, it was hosted by the Finnish TSV. I lost the English translation. Federation of Finnish Learned Societies. So if we would want to do something similar, we would always need to find someone to host and take care of the administrative tasks. And so far we've been a little bit just another island in the sea of open science policy actors. Of course, we've done our best to create links to other islands. But now with the national coordination, there hopefully will be a lot more bridging happening. So from our point of view, what we would like to see to happen is for this work to go from unfunded to funded mandate, and to find a place for research data policy coordination with other open science data issues. And even though I just said that a broad range of stakeholders were engaged in the open science and data action plan work, one stakeholder group was missing, probably because I was the person doing the work, even though I wasn't wearing my FCRD hat. So Council of Finnish Academies wasn't very much involved in that process, and now when we move forward to the implementation and building the national coordination, the science academies really need to be included in the negotiating tables. Unless we don't want to continue this, but I think if we do that, there'll be a lot of missed opportunities in bridging international and national levels and engaging researchers, because this is happening on the level of the kind of civil society of the science community. This is a picture from the Open Science and Data Action Plan, which is the kind of the target state to have this kind of holistic view of the research system, of this ecosystem where all of these elements have one part of the whole, where they all complement each other, and down there you see RDA and co-data as important parts of this ecosystem. So since I have the last slot, I thought that there is a place for me to have some like catchy take-home message to give to you. So here we go. This is I know to a large degree preaching to the choir, but and more a comment to the larger national discussion. It's been already mentioned here several times that open science is a cultural change issue, which I don't disagree at all. But cultural change it's a very nebulous concept, so I think we should kind of dig deeper what it is about. So if we agree that open science is about cultural change, then I think we must agree that open science is essentially about research data, because while we are reforming publishing with this open access movement, we are revolutionizing data management. So that's where the change needs to happen. I mean, from a researcher's point of view, open access publication is still a publication pretty similar to the way things have been done so far. But on the level of research data management, there's an earthquake happening. So that's for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Unfortunately, Leah had to leave already, and we are at spend some overtime, but in case there is one more question, I think we can still take one. Yes, Pekka.
So hi, Pekka Arvonen again. So thanks Heidi for kind of very valid comments. Actually, well, I wish Leah was still here, but one thing that I sort of wanted to comment is about this kind of the bringing the community on board and then the kind of this political urgency. So there's another saying is that an elephant is you eat an elephant one bite at a time. So and I think there's a bit of an issue of time scales. So there's the kind of this political, I mean, pretty soon sort of decisions have to be made and commitments need to be made and there are kind of a legal developments happening, so one cannot wait for the community to come aboard. The cultural change will take a minimum of 20 years. But then, so there's kind of time scales. There are things that need to be done now, and then there's this big cultural change that needs to somehow evolve in this natural way. And one has to be able to attend to both of these. So one cannot, I mean, you cannot rush the community, it will take 20 years, but also you cannot delay this kind of commitments and then political level decisions by 20 years. So this one of the challenges that we have now. So.
Thank you, Pekka. I think you have a point there, and definitely cultural change isn't anything that is ready and done at some point. Heidi, thank you. I think at this point I will just say a few closing words from this event. So thank you all for your participation. I think we had some quite nice discussion today. And we had also, I think, 12 remote participants, so people have been listening to us, which is nice, of course. As a next steps from the RDA National Node point of view. Well, firstly, I wish that all of you will join RDA as individual members if you are not yet. And if you are a member, please check that you belong to RDA Finland group as well. We will stay alert for future calls of RDA, but please, you should do that too. And prepare yourself if there are, for example, grants available for the adoption cases. Please let us know if we can help you in that process. There was already some discussion about perhaps taking the next RDA National Node event to campus. Maybe Kirjakulma was one of those mentioned. So I wish that after this event we will still keep in touch. And please, if you have any ideas for collaboration or you would like to invite us over, please just do so. But otherwise, I think we are done. We are hungry. Oh, we have one question. Yeah, I understand your point of view. Okay, thank you all. Have a nice lunch and have a good start for the summer as well.